Same old Falcons, and we just watched their season go up in flames.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast. I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman. And, of course, Locked On Falcons is your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the now #1 sports podcast network all across the world. And today's Locked On Falcons is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. So on today's episode, we will be talking about why the Falcons let another winnable game slip through their grasp, all the things that went wrong for the team. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that went right. We'll get into that Michael Penix pump meter, which young defenders stepped up, and then sort of like, okay, where do we go from here now that the Falcons are, wrapping up this 4-game losing streak? Well, we'll see if they're wrapping it up. But now that the Falcons have, slid to 4 consecutive losses, how do they get right? But I want to thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this podcast. You are the reason the Locked On Podcast Network is the #1 sports podcast network all across the globe. And if you want to become an everydayer, all you have to do is subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So let's jump into this game, right? The Falcons lose 31-25 in overtime, very winnable game, but basically the same issues that have been plaguing this team throughout the season. Once again, plagued the Falcons again. This is kind of who they are. They're not a very good football team. They played a winnable game. They found ways to lose. It wasn't all bad, but we'll get the bad out of the way to sort of start this thing. The run defense, as has been all season long, was abysmal, especially today. 323 yards allowed rushing, 244 from Jonathan Taylor. Special teams coverage, bad. We've seen inconsistency, if not downright bad play from the special teams all season long. And then inconsistency on the offense continues to plague them. These last couple of weeks, especially with the third down offense being non-existent. And so you see some good, you see some bad, and overall you get the sort of consistent, inconsistent performance from the Atlanta Falcons. And, it's pretty typical loss. I noted to the Locked On Falcons insiders during the game early on. It's like, because we talked before on this podcast where it's like, you kind of know what game you're going to get from the Falcons based off of the first 2 drives, right? By the end of the second offensive series, like, are the Falcons going to have it on this particular Sunday? And it seemed like they did, right? They had I believe a turnover on the opening drive, and then they came back on the second drive and were able to get points and go down the field and score a touchdown. But let me double check that. I don't want to give you guys bad information. Yeah, they had a fumble sack strip on an unblocked defender coming off the edge, where Michael Penix did not see that guy coming and got stripped from behind, and then ultimately were able to score a touchdown on their second series. And it was like, okay, like this is gonna be a competitive game. And then you get to close to halftime, you get a Jesse Bates interception just before half. You have some questionable clock management. Again, a consistent through line with this team, with Raheem Morris not burning a timeout that could have given the team an extra 20 seconds or so to move the ball down the field right before the half and maybe set up a field goal. But you come out of the half, you get the ball for once, you score a field goal to start out the second half, so you win that middle 8 portion of the game. You got to push the Falcons lead to 17-13 at that point in time. Then you come back, get a stop with Jalon Walker and James Pearce combining for another sack strip like they did last week. This time, instead of Walker getting the sack and Pearce recovering it, it was Pearce that got the sack and Walker recovering the fumble. But then the offense doesn't capitalize. They go 3 straight punts on their next 3 series. They can't convert any third downs. They didn't convert a single third down all game. They were 0 for 8 against the Colts. They've been 3 for 21 the past 2 games combined going into this week. So a combined 3 for 29, less than 10% conversion rate for the or slightly more than 10% conversion rate for the Falcons over the last 3 games. Michael Penix on the first third down that they failed to convert after that sack strip. He almost threw a pick to Sauce Gardner on that particular play, but Sauce dropped it. Then you get pressure on the second series, and he's forced to kind of throw it away just to avoid a sack. And then you get a wide open David Sills over the middle, and Penix just misses him. And, you know, I said the term wide open David Sills over the middle of the field. Guys, that's the only time I've ever said that on this podcast, and probably will be the only time. And you got to take advantage of those opportunities the Falcons did. That play kind of is a microcosm of this particular Sunday. And then the Colts come back. They retake the lead 22-17, thanks to an 83-yard touchdown run by Jonathan Taylor, the longest of the year, eclipsing Bijan's against the Bills. And I know the 323 yards is the most any team has rushed for this season. I got to know if it's a record or not, you know, or where it ranks all time, you know, in terms of overall yards. So historically bad run defense for the Falcons. Just don't know as I'm recording this how historically bad. Haven't looked it up. But then the Falcons come back, you know, after that score and retake the lead 25-22, where you got a big, you know, bunch of runs from Tyler Algier. Drake London wins on a 2-point conversion against Sauce Gardner, but then there's a big kickoff return for Amir Abdullah. That was a big problem with field position all day long for the Falcons, giving up a ton of return yards and setting up Colts scores. You get a 3rd and 21 for the Colts, and then Daniel Jones scrambles for 19 yards, sets up a 4th and 2. Tyler Warren out muscles Billy Bowman. The Falcons defense does tighten up. You get a second sack on that series. You got an Arnold Ebiketie sack earlier to push it to the 3rd and 21. You get a Ronnie Harrison sack, and the Colts are forced to settle for a field goal to tie the game up and send it into overtime. But Falcons get the ball to start overtime. They can't run the football. They can't convert a 3rd down thanks to another blitz, another stunt from Zaire Franklin. He gets clean for a sack again. Stunts and blitzes have been super problematic. This offense has no answers for blitzes. This offensive line cannot defend a stunt to save their life. That has been a through line throughout the season. You get a bad punt from Bradley Pinion, and then the Colts are just basically like, oh, let's throw it over the top to Tyler Ward and just hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor. He finishes with an 8-yard touchdown. Colts walk away with a big win in this game. And so, you know, this was a game where the Colts did not take advantage of all their opportunities. They missed the field goal. They missed an extra point. They failed to convert a 2-point conversion. So, you know, the Falcons give up 31 points. They probably should have given up 37 points in this game. And you had an opportunity with the Colts not, you know, firing on all cylinders. Again, the run game was working. The explosive passing attack was working. I think they had 8 or 9 20-plus yard plays in this game. But you were able to get 7 sacks. You were able to create turnovers. 2 turnovers. You were positive in the takeaway. This is the second straight week where the Falcons have been positive in the takeaway, giveaway category turnover margin and managed to lose a game. They were going into the last 2 games. Were 8-0 in those situations under Raheem Morris. They've been 0-2 the last 2 games. So again, the Falcons find ways to lose football games, and this is just who they are. Where we're at this point, if it hasn't been clear to you over the previous 8 games, it should be clear to you now that we have 9 games under our belt that, you know, when push comes to shove, this team is going to find itself in the dirt, you know, staring up, being pushed, being shoved, and all that stuff when it comes to winning these very winnable games. And so we'll continue the conversation later today, talking about, you know, how much is the season done, you know, and whatnot. But, you know, there are a couple of bright spots. And so we'll talk about some of the young, talented players on defense popping in this game. We'll talk about Michael Penix, and we'll sort of give him a rating on the Penix pump meter as we continue today's Locked On Falcons.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it, because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Rippling. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promise to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS. That's SAD, software as a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is a unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace the mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give their leaders clarity, speed, and control. Right? We love clarity, speed, and control because we don't get that from the Atlanta Falcons. So let Rippling give that to your company by uniting your employees, teams, and departments all in one system. And they're going to remove the bottlenecks, the busy work, and the silos that your software has created. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or just fill in the gaps that your software stacks, Rippling can do it all. And right now you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. That's RIPPLING.com/LockedOnNFL, rippling.com/LockedOnNFL, and you will get 6 months free. Terms and conditions apply. So I want to thank all of you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen. Shout out to the everydayers out there because you are helping make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. So let's talk Michael Penix pump meter as we do on all of these rapid reactions, post game breakdowns. We give Michael Penix a rating on the pump meter, and there are 4 levels to the pump. 0 pumps means not a good day for Michael Penix. 1 pump means it was fine. He managed the game, all that stuff, but could have been better. 2 pumps is peak Michael Penix. We might have to adjust the pump meter based off of Rico Dowdle's touchdown celebration that got penalized. The NFL, no fun. But 3 pumps is too many pumps, right? That's how it used to be, but apparently 2 pumps is too many. But again, we're not going to overcomplicate the pump meter. 3 pumps is too much. That means Michael Penix was actively hurting the team's chances of winning football games. And to me, this was a 1 pump performance for Penix. Like, there were some positives from the game. I think he was better last week in the Patriots loss, at least going back and reviewing the film. If it wasn't clear throughout the week when we broke that down, to me, that was Penix's best road game of his career. Even going back to that Washington game last year, I thought he was better last week once we reviewed the film. We'll see what the film says this week. I'm sure it'll be another sort of inconsistent, sort of middle of the road sort of performance for Penix, but we've seen worse from him on the road. So again, you take the 2 games as a whole on the road, the last 2 games against the Patriots and Colts, and you're like, okay, well, maybe he's finally figured out that we can get winning performance. And again, he missed some throws in this game. A 1 pump performance is by no means perfect, but he made some plays that you wanted to see him make that gave this team an opportunity, but unfortunately they could not take advantage of those opportunities. So too many drops, too many missed throws. We did see him try to move around, try to create off structure, but we also saw him struggle there. So it's kind of an inconsistent performance. So a 1 pump performance, maybe it goes down to half a pump when we watch the film. I don't think it's going to go higher than a 1 pump, but we'll see sort of on that. But the other thing I want to discuss, as we've been discussing these last several weeks, this season is not, for those of you that are new here, I gave up on the Falcons season after they lost to the Dolphins a couple of weeks ago in week 8, and basically said the rest of the season is really about evaluating Michael Penix and seeing who are some of the other young pieces that are going to be around beyond this year, because it's pretty much a lost season. And, a big part of that, the Falcons added a lot of youth this offseason, particularly in the draft. And, we've been looking at Jalon Walker and James Pearce as the double-edged sword. If that's going to be their new tag team partnership, where once again, those 2 guys tag teamed last week. We had the Jalon Walker sack strip on Drake May and James Pearce scooping it up and nearly scoring on a fumble recovery. And this week we got the reverse of that, where it was James Pearce that comes, unblocked off the edge on the backside. And then Jalon Walker is able to scoop up that football and get a recovery. And so those are 2 guys. We've seen Jalon Walker this week last week, especially the Bills game, his last 3 games, it does feel like after a pretty quiet first month of the season, Walker has kind of turned a corner and becoming much more of an impact player and one of the best players on this Falcons defensive front. And I had a Locked On Falcons insider who's been teasing me because those of you that are everydayers know I was not as high on Jalon Walker purely as a pass rusher when the Falcons drafted him. And he was like, Aaron, are you finally ready to declare that Jalon Walker is, the Falcons' best edge rusher? And based off of the last couple of games, like, absolutely. He has absolutely been the team's best edge rusher in the last 3 games that he has played over, going back to that Bills game. So, that is for you, Luke, if you were looking for that admission here on the podcast. So you got that. And it was nice to see James Pearce have a couple of positive plays. Like the last couple of weeks, after a really promising start for him, it was kind of like he would give you like 1, maybe 2 positive reps, and then it would be pretty quiet for the most part. And I felt like, at least watching the game live, it felt like Pearce popped a number of times, more than twice in this game. We'll see if that holds up over scrutiny when we watch the film. Another rookie that we welcome back, and we were hoping to see him have sort of a Jalon Walker-esque, bounce back performance after missing several weeks, was Billy Bowman. I thought Bowman, at least, we'll see what the film says, but the coverage was good for the most part, right? Josh Downs, who is the Colts' primary nickel or slot receiver, and Billy Bowman working as that nickel corner. Josh Downs had 1 catch in this game for 3 yards, and I don't even think it was against Billy Bowman. So that is probably a testament to Billy Bowman that Downs was kept in check in this game after 3 straight games where he caught a touchdown. However, there were some moments in this game, whether it was tackling Jonathan Taylor, whether it was getting out-muscled by Tyler Warren, where my biggest knock on Billy Bowman, him being an undersized player, kind of got exposed. And you do wonder a little bit about, like, as good as Billy Bowman is, there's always, to me, going to be a concern about that ceiling, because bigger guys, NFL-sized running backs and NFL-sized tight ends, and Taylor and Warren are certainly not small guys, but we're not talking about like, 2 of the biggest running back, the biggest running back in the NFL. He's not Derrick Henry. We're not talking about, I don't even know who's some 6'8" tight end or anything like that. Those guys were able to be a little bit more physical. And so, I think it was a good game coming back for Billy Bowman, as I said, in terms of no real breakdowns in coverage, but some of the tackling stuff was certainly. But we'll see what the film says. Xavier Watts, the only real memorable moment for him was a negative one where either they gave up a big catch to Alec Pearce. There's been a lot of discourse about, quarters and throwing over the top, and the Colts went deep post against D. Alford to Alec Pearce on the 37-yard touchdown early in this game. And so it's just funny to me, because it's like there's been a lot of discourse online about, like, do you attack deep on quarters? And the Colts said yes. And most football people agree that that's one of the ways that you can attack quarters, but that's a conversation for another day. So last tidbit on the defense aren't necessarily positive tidbits for young players, but just want to point it out because it's been an ongoing conversation the last few weeks. Hey, JD Bertrand made a play, guys. He didn't have a good game, but he made 1 play. So that's 1 more than 0. And so maybe next week he'll trend it and he'll make 2 plays. But he had a positive play, a big time stop on a 4th and 1 on a toss play to Jonathan Taylor at the end of the third quarter. You saw the Falcons finally get Josh Woods in the mix there in the Falcons nickel defense. You still continue to see a lot of Ronnie Harrison in this game in the big nickel for this Falcons defense. So that committee system that Jeff Ulbrich, Falcons DC, said that they would use to replace Divine Diablo, you finally got to really see that, because, the first game it was just JD Bertrand, and that didn't work. That was very bad against Miami. Last week, you saw a mix of JD Bertrand and Ronnie Harrison. We broke that down on the All-22 review, and it wasn't a good week for Bertrand. It was better because it was it was less bad, I guess, is probably a more accurate statement. And Harrison flashed some things. And then Josh Woods made a couple of nice plays in this game. So it does feel like the Falcons are finally kind of figuring it out, that they're able to kind of tread water at that second linebacker spot opposite Caden Ellis in Divine Diablo's absence finally this week. But obviously, they weren't getting positive play out of that position, or really any position on defense, because when you give up 323 yards rushing, a lot of people aren't doing their job. It's not, I've had some debates with some folks, about how far away the Falcons defense is. And like people are like, oh, we just need to get a nose tackle. And I'm just like, yeah, like, this is not one player is going to solve the Falcons run defense issues. Like they need a whole new front seven. It's like, James Pearce and Jalen Walker, Walker, you're fine. James Pearce not the greatest run defender. So it's just like, who else is joining him in the front seven in the future? So we'll see on that front. But at least Jalen Walker continues to look good. And, JPJ, it was nice. It was nice to see you, JPJ, because we haven't really seen you make those impact plays as consistently as we would like to see over the last 6 games. So nice to see you, JPJ. Hopefully you will keep it up, and we will continue to talk positively about some of these young defensive players as the rest of the season wears on. But we'll talk about, to wrap up today's episode, what's at stake for the rest of the season. Is it over? What do the Falcons need to do? We'll give you the lip service on the Falcons potentially turning their season around and how that is possible as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Now, guys, the NBA season is back, and there's no better place to go to get in on that action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And whether you missed the opening tip-off or you're just looking to ride the hot hand, FanDuel is going to have live bets from everything from who's going to score next to any fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine those live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It's what keeps games exciting, every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late game push. And right now, to take advantage of this offer, all you got to do is head on over to FanDuel.com. And when you do, as a new customer, and you win your first $5 bet, right? You put down $5, that bet wins. You're going to get $300 in bonus bets. Again, if your first $5 bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com right now to sign up. Download the FanDuel app and play your game with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And today's episode is also brought to you by Georgia Access. Have your health or family needs changed lately? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state's marketplace for Georgians to compare, apply, and enroll in health insurance plans that offer the best value for their individual needs. Open enrollment is happening right now. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. That's georgiaaccess.gov. Georgia Access, health insurance for Georgia by Georgia. So the Falcons are, in the midst of a 4-game losing streak, tied for the longest losing streak of the Raheem Morris era. Last year, they lost 4 straight games late in the season, and it was easy to kind of be like, it's all Kirk Cousins' fault. And this year, it's kind of like, well, it's not just one person, right? And we'll get into this, I'm sure, potentially tomorrow and in the coming days and weeks, that, it's everybody's looking for one person. Like, hey, it's Raheem's fault. It's Marquise Williams' fault. It's Younghoe Koo's fault. It's Zach Robinson's fault. It's Michael Penix's fault. It's J.D. Bertrand's fault, right? Everybody's trying to find one person that they can scapegoat for all the Falcons' problems. And the reality is they're just not that good a team, right? And it's a bunch of people's fault, and they need to get better as a football team. And we'll see if they can get better as this season wraps up, now that they have 8 games left. And, essentially, if they really want to have a realistic shot at making the playoffs, they kind of have to run the table. But we'll see how the NFC playoff picture goes. But, that's not necessarily in the cards. A couple of weeks ago, I think after the Dolphins game, I was talking about the 3 things that you needed to see from the Falcons this season in order for this coaching staff to be able to say, yes, we deserve to keep this job. It's making the playoffs, which basically I'm saying that ship has sailed. Although technically, mathematically, I think they probably still have like a 4 or 5 or 6% chance of making the playoffs after today's loss, right? So mathematically, that still exists, but we know that ship has sailed. Having a winning record, which is still technically on the table, we'll break down how and how they could do that. And then the other factor is you got to really buy into Michael Penix's development and be like, hey, you got to go to Arthur Blank and be like, hey, if you fire us, you're going to completely derail this guy's development. He's on the path to success, and we need to see that turnaround for Michael Penix. We thought last week's performance on the road against New England was kind of that breakthrough that we can get good road performance again, good enough road performances for the Falcons today from Michael Penix. They need more than this as the rest of the season wears on, particularly with some upcoming road games against some very winnable games. But, as I said earlier, like after that Dolphins game, I was crashing out because I thought the season was over at that point. Because to me, if this team had any sense of urgency, they would have bounced back then. And now we're still looking for that bounce back 2 weeks later against Carolina at home. You know, it's a winnable game, right? You know, they should. You know, I don't know if I should say they should have beaten Carolina in week 3. I think we have more than enough evidence to tell us that right now, as things sit here through 9 games in almost 10 weeks. And I don't know if, you know, I'm recording this as far as I know, Carolina is losing. Okay, I'm looking at the score right now. They're losing to the Saints as I'm recording this. But, you know, Carolina has shown themselves to be a better football team than the Atlanta Falcons this year. So, you know, will the Falcons get that much needed win next week? We'll see. But, you know, these last 2 losses have been very frustrating, both very winnable. But you play better football teams the last 2 games. And so to me, I look at it and I go, the better teams won, right? Even though the Falcons could have made a couple of plays here or there to steal these wins, the better teams won. Like, this is not a good football team. I think we have more than enough evidence to suggest this. But you do have 3 very winnable games coming up next week at home against Carolina, then the following another 2-game road stand against the Saints and the Jets. 3 very winnable games. And if you win those 3 games, you're still at 6-6. And so if you're at 6-6, you know, I forget what the playoff odds are, but I think most years it's like on average, like 25% or something like that, 25-30% playoff odds at that point. Again, you're still going to be behind the 8 ball unless you get a lot of help from, you know, several teams in the NFC, because it does look like we're going to get at least 7 teams in the NFC winning 10+ games, but we'll see on that front. And the Falcons don't hold the tiebreakers really over any of those teams at this point. But you know, if you can get to 6-6, it gives you a shot, to me, of not necessarily the playoffs, but really a realistic shot of getting that winning record that has been so elusive for the Atlanta Falcons. And maybe this team will actually win 9 games like I predicted them to at the beginning of the season. Right, because if you get to 6-6, all you got to do is win more games in the back 5, 3-2. That's all you got to do. Right? We're not asking you to run the table. We're not asking you to go 5-0. We're just win 3-0. Right? That means you beat the Saints in week 18. You beat the Cardinals whenever you play them week 16, whatever that is, and then you got to steal 1 win against a better team like Tampa Bay, Seattle, or LA. It's doable. Right? It's doable if this team gets to act together. But there's no reason at this stage to think that the team is going to get their act together. Basically, I'm saying it's all a possibility, right? We acknowledge the possibility, and who knows? In 6 weeks, we may be sitting here like, oh, the Falcons have won, you know, 4 of their last 6 or 5 of their last 6 or whatever. I would love to be having that conversation. But basically, I'm sitting here saying, as you guys know me, I believe it when I see it. I think you guys should be in a similar mindset. I will believe it when I see it when it comes to this team. So those are my thoughts on it. It just feels like we're just having the same exact conversations about this team, all those same issues that we've been having. So I don't really have any profound insights from this Colts game. You know, tomorrow, I think I don't know. You know, we'll see. But like probably because now we've played 9 games, and so more than half the season is played, we can kind of look back, big picture stuff, have a big picture conversation about the direction of this organization, talk, you know, in depth about, you know, Raheem Morris's job status, Terry Fontenot's job status, look ahead to the offseason and some of the challenges that this team is going to have to face to get their season or the future seasons on track and bounce back from this disappointment that is the 2025 season thus far. But, you know, for me, I'll just say this to wrap it up. Like, you know, I don't see any reason as we sit here today for Raheem and Terry to be back this year. There's no reason for me to think that next year is going to, even in a world where they've managed to win, you know, 6 of their last 8 games. To me, there's no reason to think that we won't get a repeat of this sort of up, down, inconsistent roller coaster of a ride type of performance. And like, that's just not good enough. That's been the Falcons for the last 8 years. To me, it's been sort of the through line during the Terry Fontenot era, whether it's Terry's, you know, direct fault or not, but like it's kind of run its course at this point in time. And so I think this team is rightfully headed for a reset this offseason. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. We'll talk more about that on tomorrow's episode. So continue to make us your first listen. All right. And check us out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. For your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On NFL. They'll have you covered for all of the Week 10 action as your second listen. And again, we thank every single one of you, not just the everydayers, but you casuals. You guys contributed as well. You are the reason why the Locked On Podcast Network is the number one sports podcast network. So appreciate you. Even if the Falcons don't respect your time, we here on Locked On Falcons and the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, we definitely respect your time. And so we will do our best to continue to keep you engaged watching bad football teams here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, number one sports podcast network, your team every day.